everybody. This is the first introductory session of our Executive Learning Program, and we're going to mostly be dealing with prayer. And mainly in the mornings we'll deal with a very short verse and become more familiar with the prayers. But I wanted to give an overall bird's eye view and then a very in-depth teaching about tefillah, about prayer. So if we notice in Psalm 109, verse 4, King David said, Ani tefillah, that is for me, my life is all prayer. And we know in the Gemara that the sages said, Halavai, if only I would be praying all day long. So we really want to know what it means, prayer. What does tefillah mean? Because even to translate it as prayer, it's not the best translation. So I brought here, the first quote is from the Ramban in Parshat Bo, where he discusses prayer. And the purpose of all the commandments is that we believe in our God and be thankful to Him for having created us. For we know no other reason for the first creation, meaning man. There was a few things that we discussed earlier, and that is that Leah named her fourth child Yehudah, which is based on gratitude and being thankful to Hashem for having received much more than she expected. And that is why the Jew is called Yehudah, Yehudi, Jews based on Yehudah, because we are walking gratitude creatures. We are creatures who are to be full of gratitude. And God the Most High has no demand on the lower creatures, excepting one thing, that man should know and be thankful to God for having created him. So to fulfill our mission in life, we should be constantly in a state of gratitude, or prayer. Or we'll see what the definition of prayer really is. The purpose of raising our voices in prayer, you must ask, why do we even have to raise our voices at all? Doesn't God know what we think and what's on our heart? And of the service in the synagogues, why do we have to go to a synagogue to pray? What's so important? As well as the merit of public prayer. It's precisely this. The people should have a place wherein they assemble and express their thankfulness to God for having created them and supported them, and thus proclaim and say before Him, we are your creatures. So what I decided was the first thing to bring was the introduction, the overview of prayer from the Art Scroll Daily Prayer Book. And every time he brings some type of a source, I wanted to go more in depth. So we'll try to go through a little bit, and then we'll work backwards and downwards, meaning in depth. First of all, we translated tefillah as prayer, but it's not really a great translation, but we'll get a better understanding as we go along. When we think of the word prayer, we think of our needs and requests and a litany of endless heal me, enlighten me, enrich me, redeem me, glorify me, forgive me, as if it's all about me. Perhaps our concept of prayer has been all wrong. As children, we would ask God to grant our wishes, just as we asked our parents to take us places and to buy us toys. Please, Father, take me here. Mother, please buy me that. Please, God, give me this. Rather than fall into the modern trap of insisting that man can control so much of his life and environment that he need not pray, let us examine what prayer really is and always was. When we are done, we will realize that the commandment to pray is no less binding today than ever, and that our need for its benefits is perhaps greater than ever. Now, what is the word for a human being? As a synonym for a human being, the Mishnah in Baba Kama uses the word maveh. That is a very unfamiliar word in the Talmud, and is derived from the root word bet ayin hey, which means to pray. So I'll quickly recap what we said. If you look in Baba Kama, in the Mishnah, it talks about four primary damages. These are very relevant today, even though it sounds like it's not, because who has an ox today? But we do drive in cars, and we do get in accidents, and we do walk down the road with carriages or carts. And perhaps it fits into one of these categories. So the four primary damages the Mishnah tells us is the ox, the pit, the maveh, which is not defined, it's just explained as maveh, which we will define according to one opinion as a human being, and fire, habe'er. Okay. So just to recap on what the mission is actually discussing is that there is a difference between what an ox does to damage as a human being can do to damage. And one of the main differences is that the ox, if you own the ox and the ox caused damage to somebody, the only thing you're obligated to pay is for the nezik, for the actual damage itself. But if a human being does the damage, not through an intermediary, so we learn in the Gemara, we learn in the oral Torah, that one has to pay not only the actual damage, but tsar, the pain, the physical pain suffered by the damaged party, refoy, the medical cost, shevet, unemployment, and boshet, humiliation. Okay, so we're not going to go into depth at this point, but if you do want to understand a little better the difference between, if you look in Leviticus 24:19, it does say over there, if a man puts a blemish in his fellow, the words a man are superfluous. And that's where we learn out the 4 different types of damages that a person must pay, in addition than if it was just an ox that did the damage. Okay, so the next thing that I'm getting confused with my pages. The next thing that the art scroll goes into is like this. In other words, the Talmud defines man as a creature that prays. Furthermore, the Talmud teaches that a nefesh, the life-sustaining soul, is synonymous with prayer. And now we're going to go into Brachos 5b a little bit deeper to get into that. Let me just finish the paragraph. Strange. Such definitions appear fitting for intensely spiritual, observant people. But what if someone whose observance is just casual, or even a non-believer? The Talmud's teaching applies even to such people, because if that's who we are, if we are prayer, it's irrelevant if you're observant or not. It's irrelevant whether you believe in God or not, and it's irrelevant whether you go to synagogue to pray or not. The Talmud's teaching applies even to such people. How then is prayer so central to their lives? So let's go to Gemara Brachot 5b. And then you can find on the source sheet on number 8. So there's a story about Abba Binyamin, and he mentions that if 2 people walk into a Beit Knesset to pray, and one of them, let's say, finishes first, and the second one does not wait for his friend to finish, and he goes ahead and he leaves the Beit Knesset, and the friend remains there alone, the Gemara says, Torfin lo tefilato b'fanav, that his prayer is either ripped up or passed over. We'll have to discuss what that means. It's torn up for him before God. We don't know who. Is it the person who left, or is it the person he left behind? But it's not accepted to Hashem. And then the Gemara goes and brings a proof, because the Gemara asks, as it always does, from where do you know such a truth? So in Job 18:4, it says, Toref nafsho bi'apo, one who destroys his soul in his anger. Mil'ancha ta'azov aretz, shall the earth be abandoned for your sake. So there's a drasha, there's expounded, this verse is expounded regarding, teaching us about a man who would leave his friend alone in a shul, in a Beit Knesset. And this verse is speaking about him, that he is causing himself to ruin or to uproot or to tear apart his soul. But his soul, we're talking about his prayer. His prayer and his soul are synonymous. Now, would you think that on account of just leaving a shul and leaving a friend, that the Shekhinah, that the divine presence, should leave there just because he left his friend alone praying? And not only that, the Gemara says, not just that it's causing the Shekhinah to remove from the situation of the 2 friends, but even from all of Israel. As the verse in Deuteronomy 32, it's the continuation of the same verse in Job 18:4. V'yatek tzor min makomo, and shall the rock be removed from his place. What is the rock? Tzor. We all know what a rock is, the rock with a capital R, and that is our rock, and that is Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. Ein Tzur Ela HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And how do we know that? Look in Deuteronomy 32:18, where it says, Tzur Yolodcha Teshi. You forgot the mighty rock, Tzur, who bore you. And the pasuk goes on, you forgot the God who delivered you. Meaning, from this story, right, we understand the actions here causes HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be removed from his place of the world, and he will not dwell any longer with Israel. Now we will go into the depths of what this means shortly, so let me just finish the Gemara. So if that man would have finished his prayer first and still waited for his friend, so then, and he would have not left the Beit Knesset, the Gemara asks, what reward? Mascharo, what reward is there for him? And comes Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Chanin, and he answers, whoa, Zochel brochas halalu, he will merit the blessings that it says in Isaiah 48, that's chapter 48, verses 18 and 19, which says, had you hearkened to my commandments, your peace would be as a river, and your righteousness like the waves of the sea, and your seed would be like the sand, and those emanating from your innards would be like its innards. His name shall neither be cut off nor destroyed from before me. So we understand that if the person would have waited, the word hakshevet means to wait. That is in the verse. If you would have waited, not just hearkened, but waited for my commandments. We have to understand, what does it mean, my commandments? The commandments means connected. Not just connected to God. These are 613 opportunities to connect with God, but all of Israel is one. I don't know if you see already what's happening. If the person is separating himself from his friend, as he departs from his friend in not such a nice way, that there is some type of a perud, a separation, as opposed to mitzvah, which means connecting. Because God commanded us to do chesed. He commanded us to imitate him and follow in his ways. And he is full of chesed, like the Torah is full of chesed from its beginning to its end. God created man naked, and God clothed man. So to clothe the poor, to clothe the naked, that's how the Torah begins. And at the very end, God, who buried Moses? Nobody even knows where he's buried. But God buried Moses, to bury a human being, obviously, if he's dead. So what greater chesed, what greater kindness can one do than to follow what the Torah not only describes in the beginning, but at the end, and the truth is everything in between. The Torah is a manual on how we are supposed to live our lives and imitate God. Meaning that a man is a goymel im chavero chesed. He should grant and bestow kindness to his friend by waiting for him. And by waiting for him, he will merit to the blessings we just mentioned. Now that's the Gemara, but I have quite a few interesting comments, and there should be a lot of questions that we bring up ourselves. First of all, which prayers are we referring to? So the first comment mentions that there's an opinion this is really only talking about Mariv, evening prayer. One should not leave his friend alone. Now, why is that? Because at night there's more reason to be worried about danger. Also, the way the shuls used to be set up was they were not in the cities, they were in the fields. And there's more danger walking out alone in the fields at night. But there's varied opinions that it's still a nice thing to do, even in a city where there are plenty of people, plenty of walkers by. And we're actually going to discuss what does it mean to have damage. Now, these are called in Hebrew mazikin. It means damagers. We are going to end up talking about not just thieves and bullies, but we're going to talk about angels and demons, which might spook a few people here. So we hope that you will understand that we're talking on many different levels. So he goes on to say, the comment is written in the name of the Rif. It seems from his words that, as we just said, it's only in the evening, that there's any worry about or concern about danger, that we're worried because of the thing called mazikin. Again, we're not going to loosely translate that as damagers, who are more commonly found at night. If you look in the book, the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah, who quotes in the name of Rabbeinu Hananel, that this was only a custom in their days because their Beit Knesiot, their synagogues, were found outside of the city. But because of that, you would be more concerned about leaving your friend alone because of the possibility of putting him in danger because of these damagers that are more likely found there than in the city. However, Tosfos, he writes in the name of Rabbeinu Tam, he says, and he says like this, that the truth is this also applies during the day. And only the Beit Knesiot of ours that are now found in the city, so you don't have to worry so much. However, at night, one should still wait around, even in the cities, for his friend. And now the Ri, that's one of the Bali Tosfos, he was accustomed to delay, or let's say hang around after his tefillah even during the day and wait for people. He wanted to make sure he was the last one out and not leave anybody behind. And let's go to the next. Okay, now there is an opinion. Who says it? I think it's also the Ri. Think about it a second. There are some people that don't believe in the demons and the dangerous spiritual forces, but he claims that these mazikim are not around anymore, even in the fields, and they're also certainly not found in the cities, even at night. But the reason why it's proper for a man to be concerned to wait around and not leave his friend alone is because the other person might not be able to concentrate properly on his own tefillot. So now we understand a little bit on a more practical level. If two people go in and there is a certain fear, we'll call it awe, of being in a Beit Knesset or being in a room all by yourself, that it could affect the way you're praying. So if you know someone's waiting for you and there's someone else is in the room, so you'll have a much more, I'm not going to say concentrated prayer, but I think that is what I'm saying. Your prayer won't be all over the place and cut short or for what. So you're allowing your friend to have a deeper prayer session by hanging around. I'll read his words. If you leave him alone, he won't be able to pray properly. Therefore, you should wait for him. In any place, no matter what time. But in those days, it was more, people should have worried even during the day because of the Beit Knesset was not in the city. Whereas nowadays, we're not so worried even at night. Okay, so that's one explanation. Further, the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah write that this din, this law, is a custom even where there are a lot of people in shul. That each one enters, let's say, everyone enters one at a time. So it's not like you entered with somebody, but you're in a shul nowadays. So what ends up happening, whoever's left last should wait for the other one. However, if a man does come, and I say man, I mean a person. If a person comes all by himself at a very late hour, you might think, well, he obviously knows that he himself is going to be later. He's going to finish his prayer much later than everyone else. Perhaps you don't have to wait for him. I'll just read what he says. The person walked in late, and he knows he's not going to be able to finish with everyone else. The other people don't have to wait for him. After the fact that he walked in and he knows himself he's not able to finish with everyone else. So then guess what? He reveals, it's a revelation to everyone else that he is not interested in you waiting around. He knows that he'll be there by himself, and he is the type of person who won't have any trouble praying on his own. I'll just read his words. He's not concerned that he'll be left by himself. All this makes sense so far? Anything not making sense? Furthermore, he writes that you have no obligation to wait. But you should. The only time you had to wait anyway is while he's praying. But if he is going at length with many more requests, so there's no obligation to wait. Some people, you notice, they pray very long. There's certain people, and you can leave them by themselves. You can see they're in total concentration. Now, the Gemara mentioned the word torfi lo tfilato. It would tear up his prayer. So in Judaism, we say everything is midah keneged midah, measure for measure. God does not send us punishments because he's vengeful. He sends us prophetic visions and signs of what we need to do to improve our character. And if we are smart enough and spiritual enough and contemplate and perhaps even ask other people, what could this mean? When something negative seems to happen, why is this happening to me? What was I doing wrong? What can I do better? It's measure for measure. God sends the message that we need to improve, so he sends what we call punishment, but it's not a punishment at all. It certainly feels like it, certainly seems like it, but it's not. So when we discuss the fact that God is tearing up this person's prayer, what is going on? Because he caused his friend to become, the word taruf, it means to tear up, but it's like crazy, it means crazy. He caused his friend to tear up his own prayer. After the fact that he was concerned that he was going to be left alone in the Beit Knesset and he's not going to be able to concentrate properly, therefore, the result is that his prayer, the person who left early, his prayer will be passed over by God, torn up. Good so far? He discusses the word nefesh. And we notice that the Gemara explains what the word nefesh, which usually means soul, his soul would be torn up, as we saw in Job, if I'm not mistaken. Can we look at the verse again? It said, one who destroys his soul
שמחה ששירך